Hey everyone, my name's Michael. I'm the developer advocate lead here at Xano. And in this video, we're going to continue our Connect to FlutterFlow series while covering Magic Link Login, otherwise known as Passwordless Authentication. So this allows the users of your application to not need a password to log in. Instead, what we'll do, we're going to leverage a Xano extension that is Magic Link with Sendgrid. So your users, when they get to your app, would put in their email address. They would get an email in their inbox with a link that takes them back to their app, back to your app, and actually authenticates them. So it's a really nice solution where the user doesn't need an actual password. There's other ways you can leverage this with things like forgot password, but it's a really common and great use case in today's world of app building. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so I want to first start in Xano. So if you haven't done so already, let's navigate to the marketplace, go to user authentication, and then go to Magic Link with Sendgrid. Here you can install this ready to go extension that does all this logic and leverages the Sendgrid API to actually use this Magic Link with Sendgrid flow. Now, there is some instructions on what you need to do to get set up in some environment variables that you'll need to configure. So we won't go through that in this tutorial. There's separate tutorials on how to do that. What we will show is there is a environment variable called your Redirect URI, and we will actually show how you can get that in FlutterFlow for the sake of this tutorial. So let's actually next jump over to FlutterFlow. And here I just have a completely blank project that I'm working on. And what we'll need to do is, for this, we're going to use the web app capabilities of FlutterFlow. If you want to use the Android or iOS linking capability, we'll link up the FlutterFlow documentation. There's whole other steps that you'll need to go through in order to do that. But web app is really nice to show, especially for this tutorial. So I'm going to go first to settings. And then over on the left side, if we go to platforms, we can see that web, and that also enables deep linking. So once we have that web enabled, what we'll actually see here is on this top right, we'll have this ability to actually publish our app to the web, and then we'll actually have our URL that we can use. So before I do that, I just want to come up here. So we'll have the home page where the user will land on, insert their email, hit the login button, and then we'll have another page where they'll actually land and be authenticated in the application. So I just want to go ahead and create that page first. So I'm going to add a page. We'll create a blank page, and we'll just call this we'll call this my information, because that's really what we're going to actually end up displaying here. And what we'll see over here on the right side where it says route settings, we'll actually have this slash and then my information. So you can consider that like the route in that URL. And you'll see now, also if I come up here and I click publish, what that will do is this will display that, or what this actual URL for my web app is going to be. So this page, if you can imagine, will be this long magic-link, this identifier.flutterflow.app/ my information, right? So once I actually publish this, then that will take maybe a couple minutes to actually compile everything and set those changes live to the web. But for now, I actually have this link and my route that I'm going to use as my redirect URI. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that information, and I'll navigate back over here to Xano. And either right here from the extension page and configure, or if we go to settings and we go to manage for my actual environment variables, you can see that here's the Magic Link redirect URI. And I'm just going to simply paste in my URL, and I'm going to add here my https://. So once again, at the end here, we have that my information route that we were able to get from FlutterFlow. So now that that's all set up, let's quickly jump to the API and into the Magic Link group. I just want to quickly explain the actual flow of how everything goes and make a couple of changes that's going to help us out when connecting this with FlutterFlow. So first is this auth magic link. You can see the description here says endpoint for requesting magic link. So there's one input here. The user will land on your home page, put in their email, and then what's going to happen is we're going to generate a magic link, and then we're going to put that link in a dynamic template from Sendgrid, so that sends the user an email, and they can click a link, get navigated back to your app or redirected, and log in, right? So one change I want to make in this generate magic link here, if we click in the actual custom function and scroll down to this number 9, right here in this concatenation, what I'm going to do here for this separator is I'm going to do a question mark token equals. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow FlutterFlow to be able to search for that token as a page parameter, so we can actually parse the magic token from this URL in order to pass it back to Xano and exchange it for an authentication token. So I'm just going to publish that change real quick. And let's jump back to the API. Okay, so the user first requests that magic link. They get sent an email with a URL. They click that URL, which takes us to our redirect URI that we just defined with that question mark token equals that we just added, so that parameter, and then a magic token. So once we hit that page load, we'll hit this auth magic login, which exchanges that magic token for an auth token. So we'll parse that token from the URL. We'll make sure that it matches our secret and everything. We'll decode it. If everything looks good and we pass all our preconditions, well, what we're going to do is we'll return back an authentication token in Xano so we can hit other authenticated endpoints, and then we'll update the user record. So these links are only meant to be one-time use, so a user would have to request a new one each individual time. One more change I'm going to make is going to be on this magic login endpoint. So instead of returning just the raw token here, what I'm going to say here is I'm just going to nest it in this auth token key value pairing here. So it's an actual JSON object that we're returning. It'll just make it a little bit easier to parse that with FlutterFlow. So just a couple simple changes. So once we actually hit this magic login, we'll get that auth token. We'll store it as an app state in FlutterFlow, and then we'll hit this auth me endpoint to actually show the user's information on that page. Next, let's go about actually setting up these API calls in our FlutterFlow front end. So we'll jump over to FlutterFlow, and on the left side, we'll go to this API call section. And we can either create a group, we'll have the same base URL, but I'm just going to create 3 individual API calls here. And so this first one will be request login link. And let's come back to Xano and get this auth magic link endpoint here, and I'll copy this endpoint URL. And I'm actually going to paste this in. In our query parameters here, we need to add one, and that's going to be our email, right? And so our value source here will be from variable. We'll create a new one, and then come over to variables. We'll make sure to set this as a string. And great. So next, when we go to response and test, we'll need a value here. And as you're testing and setting this up, you'll want to use an email you have access to. And remember that email will need to be populated in your user database in Xano because this is the login flow, right? So let's go ahead. I'll add my own because that's in the Xano database here. And then I will say test call. And we get true magic link sent. So now in my inbox, there should be a new email with that magic link to log in. And we'll use that. We'll go look at that in just a second. But I want to add the next API call because there's going to be something from that link, that magic token, that we'll need to set up the next API call, which is going to be the one that exchanges that magic token for an auth token. So I'm going to add yet another API call. Oops, I don't want to discard that. Let's make sure to hit add call here and save. There's no JSON path we need here because we're just sending an email to API call. And this one's going to be a post, and we'll call this the magic login. So let's go back to Xano here, and here's our magic login. I will copy this endpoint URL. Come back in here. Let's paste this in. And let's add a variable first here because we're going to need that for the body. And this is magic token. It's going to be a string. When we come back to body, we can do JSON. And right in here, we will have magic token colon, and then quotes, and let's drag our variable down here. It looks like we have one too many quotes now, so just backspace there. So you should have something that looks like this. And so when we come to actually test our call, now is when we want to navigate to our email and go ahead and grab that link. So over in my email client, we should see an email that looks something like this. Please also check your spam if this is the first time that you've set up your Sendgrid account to make sure it didn't end up in there. And this template is just the basic one we give you in Xano so you can get things up and working. Of course, you can, in Sendgrid, build a beautiful email template to have a great experience with your users. But we have this sign in with magic link. And when I select this, because I haven't actually published my FlutterFlow app yet, I think I'll probably get a not found, but we just need to grab that magic token from the actual URL that's attached in order to finish this setup of the API call. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. In FlutterFlow, I love this, may the force be with you, this 404 page. But if I actually drag my browser down into screen here where the address bar is, you can see my entire URL. So here is the redirect for my FlutterFlow app. And then here's that parameter that we added, $token equals, and then here is our magic token. So we need to grab all this. And once I've grabbed that, drag my browser back up, let's come back to FlutterFlow and paste in that magic token, and let's test the API call. And great, so we should get this. And now you can see that here's also that auth token key we put in, so that just makes it really easy to work with this JSON body. So I'm gonna select that here under JSON paths, and come down here, and we'll call this auth token, and I'm gonna add the call. Awesome. So last but not least, we'll just add that auth me endpoint to show an example of hitting an authenticated endpoint once we complete this magic login process. So one final API call here. We'll call this auth me. I'm gonna come back to Xano, and let's actually grab this auth me endpoint, and I'll paste in this URL. And first we need a variable. Go ahead and call this auth token here. This is going to be a string. And then in our headers, what we want to say is authorization, bearer. And then in flat brackets, we want auth token, because that's how FlutterFlow actually reads a variable in the header there. So when we go to response and test call, we'll have a place to put an auth token. And what we can do in Xano here, if we just go to run and debug, and on the right here where it says auth token on an authenticated endpoint, we can hit this. We can very easily just grab an auth token for a user. We can copy it with this button here, which makes it super easy. Come back here and I'll hit test API call, and there we go. So we should see the user's information. I'll go ahead and I'll just grab name and email. That's all we'll need. We don't need the ID or create it out for this. So over here in selected, just make sure to call this name and email my JSON path, and we'll go ahead and do add call. And now we're ready to start building out our UI. So let's go over here. And right now we're on the page that's our redirect. So let's go ahead and change that to my home page. And my home page here, remember, we'll have an input or a form for our email that the user can request that magic link, and then a button so they can actually go ahead and send that. So let's go ahead here. I want text. Form elements, text field, I'll add that right here. And let's see, we have label here. I like to change that to email. And then let's also add a button underneath it. So I'll drag button here. Let's go ahead and, oops, I always accidentally do that. So let me go ahead and button here again, and we'll wrap that in column. And we'll call our button request login link. Our page title here, maybe we can call this login. I tend to not do too many beautification things on my tutorials with front ends because I just care about making sure the logic and the data works coming from my backend experience. So great. So let's go ahead and set up the action for this request login link here. So I'm going to actually select the button and go to my action flow editor and hit open. And we'll say on tap, add action, and the first thing we'll do is that backend database API call. It's going to be to our request login link, we will set a variable here. It'll be our email. In the value, if we click this orange thing for dynamic information, in our widget state will be our text field for our email input. Great. And FlutterFlow likes to pre-populate this conditional if true or false succeeded. Since you're not navigating really anywhere at this point, it's up to you if you want to say, if succeeded, true, hey, check your email. False, no email found with that address. Please sign up, something like that. I might just put a message here at the very bottom that says if email found, or if existing user found with that email, something like that, please go ahead and check your email. Up to you, whatever flow you want. I've seen it done both ways. So I'll just go to alert and notification, and let's do here, just show snack bar, and I'll say the value. If user exists, email link sent. Cool, and there you have it. And I have a project issue here. Conditional action must have true or false. So I actually got in trouble with that. So let me go ahead and just bump that up. And I'll actually just disable this true false for now. So we'll just send that alert. Just be aware that you can use that true false path depending on what kind of message and experience you want if that email is actually found. So I'm going to hit close. Great, so that is our home page. So let's go over now to our My Information page. We might want to call this just My Info here. And I'm going to remove this column, and I'm going to click this entire page here. And we want to add an action here because we want to make sure when this page loads, we parse that URL from FlutterFlow, we pass it to our Xano API endpoint to exchange that magic token for an auth token that we can go ahead and use to hit authenticated endpoints. So we'll go ahead and open this. We'll say on page load, we'll do API call, and I'm going to open this. So our API call here, if we hit this drop down, will be our magic login. We're going to need to set a variable, which will be our magic token, and our value here, we can get that from a page parameter. And remember, our page parameter that we called it was token. So whatever you end up calling it, make sure to add that right here and hit confirm. And great. So here we might want to have a true false. If false, we might want to add an action here where we navigate to our home page, and we might want to have another alert here, and I'll just do a snack bar again that says login failed, please try again. Oops, and I want to open back that action flow editor because if true, we want to store that auth token as an app state. So what I need to first do is come back over here to app state, which is right above API calls, and let's add an app state variable. I'm going to call this auth token. If you want to have this persist, so when they come back to the app, they're still logged in, you can go ahead and do that. My sense is if you're using a magic token login, you might not want that, right? You might want a little more stricter security where they have to get a token every time. So maybe you don't want persisted. Totally up to you. I'm going to leave it unchecked for this example and hit create. But just know that that persisted state is available depending on what kind of user experience you want. So I'll hit create. And where am I going? Back to my UI and into my action editor. So if true, let's add an action, and let's go to our state management, update app state, say add field. There's the auth token we just added, and we need to set a value, the value to set. If we click here and we go to action outputs, we have our API result, and we have our JSON body, JSON path, and then if we open that, we should have the auth token that we define. So we can go ahead and hit confirm, and that is all we need for this action flow editor. So if false, remember, we'll just navigate back to that home page, tell them to try again. If true, we'll update our auth token app state with the auth token that we get back from this API call. So pretty easy. Let's close this up, and now in here, let's add a couple text fields here. wrap this in column. And what we want here is another API call. And we'll hit that auth me API call because now we have the auth token. So API call, and then we'll select the auth me. We need to set our variable, which is the auth token, and the value, well, we're going to get that from our app state auth token, and just hit confirm. And now in these fields here, let's go ahead. This first one will be the auth me response, and we'll just display the name. And then right below that, we'll go ahead and get our auth me response, and that will be our email. Confirm. Great, so now we're ready to actually publish this and actually go through the live flow of it all. So up here in the top right, if we go to publish, we actually need to hit this publish button, and this will just take a few minutes to actually compile and publish that to the web. So once that's finished publishing, make sure you have a deploy timestamp here, but let's actually open that up, and you can just hit this button here. We should be taken to our FlutterFlow web app, and let's add in an email, hit request login link. We should see our little snack bar, whatever message you chose to put there, and then let's navigate to our email client and finish the authentication process. So back in my email client, you can see here's my email with sign in with magic link. So I should be navigated to that my information page. We should have that token in the URL. FlutterFlow is going to take that token parameter, store it, or hit the API call to exchange it for a Xano auth token. We'll store that as an app state, and then hit our authenticated API endpoint auth me. And so here we are. Here's my info page. We have both my name and email that's hitting that auth me API endpoint. And there you go. So that is Magic Link with Sendgrid, leveraging the Xano native authentication engine and FlutterFlow. So once again, Magic Link or passwordless authentication, really great solution, especially for applications requiring a little more security, right? You do have the option to persist that auth token if you want them to come back and be logged in, but typically with Magic Link, we might see that you want the user to have to request a link each time to log in. So just keep that in mind with the flow. But once again, we installed the extension Magic Link with Sendgrid from Xano. There's some instructions that you need to go through both with Sendgrid and in Xano to set all your environment variables. We went and got the Magic Link Redirect URI, which we set up by enabling the web app version of FlutterFlow. Of course, for Android and iOS, there's additional instructions in FlutterFlow's documentation to enable that deep linking. And then we made a few modifications to the Magic Link extension. Remember, we included that token parameter for the redirect URI to attach the magic token. And we also included a key in the response for the magic login endpoint so we could work with a JSON path. And once we did that, it was pretty straightforward, right? We set it all up. We're able to email ourselves and get that magic token. So I hope you found this video helpful, yet just another great use case between Xano and FlutterFlow. The Magic Link concepts learned here apply with any front end really, so it doesn't matter if it's FlutterFlow or any other front end, but same sort of idea with that Magic Link flow. So hope you found this helpful, and see you guys in the next video.